Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat with amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Danielle Bridge to the conversation. Welcome, Danielle.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So as I always do, just brief introduction, how Danielle and I know each other. And actually, we don't really know each other that well. We were introduced for you through a mutual connection, YKP, she'll know who she is. And she put me in touch with Danielle, said, you have to talk to each other. It was a perfect opportunity to talk to somebody and record a podcast as well, of course. So this is going to be the first time I hear your story, your journey. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Danielle. It's lovely to see you. And I'll let you do your fine introduction to yourself. Let people know who you are.
Awesome, thank you so much. So my name's Danielle Bridge. I'm the Chief Exec of a company called ABC Life Support. I also chair the Cambridge Mental Health Network, so I deal quite a lot with mental health networking, organisations that help other people with their own mental health as well. And I'm a mum, a wife, two beautiful children, lots and lots of friends. Yeah, just living my best life.
Oh, brilliant. And lovely to hear that as well. And welcome to the conversation. So as I always do, just one big question and we'll see where we go with this. So your journey, your story with mental health, I'll let you define it. I'll let you tell us a bit of a story. So tell us what you want to.
So, yeah, I love this question. And okay, that's quite interesting. So I run a physical first aid training company and I have done for the past 11 years now. And one of my directors at a moment in time, about 2014, her name's Sarah Hughes. She's the Chief Executive of the Centre for Mental Health. And at the time, she was the Chief Executive of Mind, or the local Mind up here. And she said to me, Danielle, you really should go on this mental health first aid training. And at the time, I was a bit like, oh, okay, fine, sure, why not? I'll go along. And I also did the assist training as well, which is the applied suicide intervention skills training. And I loved it. And I realised that, gosh, my whole life had been in and around mental health. So I have a family member who has a diagnosis of a serious mental illness, and I grew up in that environment, right? So I realised that all of these things that we were talking about were very poignant to my life as an adult, but not really realising that it was kind of a separate thing, you know, that people kind of understood and learned about. And I remember loving it, walking away from it, not thinking anything of it until one day I went onto a first aid forum online. And if anybody's listening to this that's a physical first aid trainer, they'll know exactly which forum I'm talking about. So I went onto this forum online and somebody had written, has anyone heard of the new kid on the block? It's called Mental Health First Aid. And obviously my interest peaked. And so I continued reading. But what this person had written was also, I'm not sure what it is, but is it where you teach first aid to mental people?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was gobsmacked. You know, it was one of those moments, like those cartoon moments when my jaw hits the floor. And I'm like, what? How do people think that first of all, that language is okay? And second of all, what, you know, I was just seriously like, I just couldn't believe it. So anyway, I kind of read through this thread, and what had happened was, since the Farmer and Stephenson report that came out in 2017, brought into the general, you know, knowledge area, if you like, of first aid at work, bring it into par with the first aid at work, people had started to hear about this program. But they started to try and put it towards their business, you know, opportunities. So, okay, so I'm a first aid instructor. There's this new thing called mental health first aid. Maybe we can teach that. And it was this kind of whole area about adding to somebody's repertoire that they deliver this physical first aid training to mental people. And then obviously everybody then went and started to do more introductions into what it is. And I realised then that, first of all, I was already a mental health first aider without ever putting anything of that knowledge into practice. You know, if I'm honest, I went on the course in 2014, left with a certificate, left empowered, left really interested, but never did anything about it. Then I went onto this forum, realised that this is a new opportunity for physical first aid training instructors to be able to add to their repertoire, and made a decision at that point that if anybody was best placed to do it as a first aid training company, it would be mine.
Right.
Because of my knowledge of this subject matter and the fact that I didn't want to do it to make money. It was about empowering people. Now, rewind maybe 4 years before that, my organisation became a community interest company. And off of the back of that, the whole vision and mission for my business is to make training accessible to everybody. And in the beginning, it was life-saving skills, first aid training, accessible to everyone. Now, the interesting reason behind that was because back in my youth, living with my parents, we had a very, very difficult childhood, a very difficult family life. And as a result, unfortunately, we ended up living in a women's refuge, experiencing extreme domestic violence. And at that time, I remember lots of parents, well, mums and children living in this house that I lived in. And when I started working for St John Ambulance as a trainer, I remember thinking to my head, man, why do parents not get first aid training, right? Why do parents not get first aid training?
Yeah.
And off of the back of that, when I was old enough and experienced enough, I worked around my own business when my first child was born. And the aim was to try and reach people who were difficult to reach. And I think the reason behind that want or that drive for me was thinking back to my mum, who was living in that refuge many years prior, never having access to life-saving skills, because to be frank, we didn't know where our next meal was coming from, let alone accessing a first aid training course because your kid's choking or something like that. And that stayed with me, and it stayed with me for a long time. And I decided as a business, I wanted to try and reach those people that were just as deserving as anybody else that had the money and the finances to access this training, but didn't have the inclination or the mindset at that moment, for whatever reason, to access it. So that's why my business was founded as a CIC. Yeah. So fast forward back to this course, when I decided to add this training to my repertoire, it was because I really, really, really wanted people to have access to mental health, psychoeducation, if you like, that would help them navigate their own lives, and to help them help other people navigate their own lives in terms of their mental health journey, right? And throughout this whole process, I've realized, as you know, and the people that are listening to this, everybody has mental health, everyone. But what they don't have access to is the knowledge that will help them understand that they are and can be empowered to help people, either for themselves or for the people that are close to them that they know and love. And that's why I do what I do. It's only in my later life that I realized that mental ill health has affected my entire upbringing, you know, in terms of my father's diagnosis and, you know, the fallout out of the back of that. And it's not really a story I tell everybody, right? It's not why I do what I do primarily, but it is certainly given me an experience of what it would be like, or what it has been like, to live with the legacy of living with serious mental illness in your home. And using that experience, I'm able to explain to people, first of all, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Second of all, there is education around that, where if you're empowered to understand what the processes are, it can help you as a family, it can help you as an individual, it can help you as a business owner to work out your place in that person's journey to be able to make a difference. So mental health is with all of us. Mental illness doesn't affect all of us, and I think if we can try and navigate those waters in this lay terms that people can understand, it would make those conversations a little bit easier, right?
Yeah, I find it fascinating listening to you, and thank you for sharing what you've shared as well there, and talking about your you know, your personal perspective from your family and things like that. So just genuinely thank you for that. It's interesting, isn't it? You made a point there, and maybe I'm going to challenge it even, you know, just because I think that's what we have to do. We have to have this healthy debate around these conversations, don't we? Because otherwise we just sort of take it verbatim. I think mental health does affect all of us, even, you know, it's a mental illness, affects all of us, because it might not be us personally that's struggling, but, you know, from your perspective, you haven't experienced that element, but you've supported or been around that element, so you've seen it. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder how many people would be able to recognize that point, because I think that's the challenge, like the blink of view, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And actually, I'm going to challenge back on that one. I have a diagnosis myself. I've had a diagnosis of illness and health anxiety, and I've had that for a number of years, over about 20 years. But it's not something I necessarily talk about in order to kind of, validate my knowledge, if you like. because I do think it's important to share your experiences. And when people hear that from me, they're like, what? I never knew that you lived with that, because it starts to break down barriers about what mental illness looks like and how it affects people. And the fact that I have entered into therapy, the fact that I have had CBT before, the fact that I have, gone down the IAPT route myself, and I'm able to share that experience with people. So yeah, you are right that maybe mental illness does affect everybody, primarily not necessarily, but by living with somebody or witnessing it, they have. And also then I suppose the conversation comes around diagnosis or not then, right? And then that's a whole different ball game as to whether or not someone's whether or not somebody's received a diagnosis or not. So yeah, it's interesting. And I think if people can continue to have these conversations from their own frame of reference, and the reason I challenged you on that is because without speaking about it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody hasn't had it.
I love it that you've unlocked that. You've brought that in. Right, and it's this is what I love is just having open conversations about mental health without the fear that it's like, it feels normal for me. I don't know about you if you feel normal with these conversations, but that's what this is trying to promote. It's that normality around, look, it's okay to say it, and if you don't want to say it, you don't have to. And if you do open up and share, it enlightens people a little bit more, doesn't it? I'm inspired when people tell me more than anything else. I don't when I talk about my own mental health, I don't feel ashamed talking about it. I just say, look, it is what it is. I can't change, I can make a change and adjust things, but I can't change what's happened in the past. I can only look forward to the future and be present today. So it's really interesting. So some of those anxieties, is it okay if we just delve a little bit into those? Are you okay with talking a bit?
Yeah, sure.
So for people listening, so can you define sort of moments when that would have been more prevalent in sort of some of your feelings?
The pandemic.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So
why would that be?
Right. So but for me, I've had issues around kind of health anxiety for a number of years. And if you look at the reasons why people will often have these sort of situations, sometimes they can be pinpointed, sometimes they can't. For me, my mum had a serious a heart issue years and years and years ago. And off the back of that, I then became very ultra paranoid about her, ultra paranoid about myself, ultra paranoid around health and illness. And it was well managed for a number of years. But then the pandemic kind of totally threw that off for me, totally and utterly threw it off. And I found myself in a situation without my support network, without my coping mechanisms that were ordinarily about other people, and my whole life existing kind of with freedom. And when you take that freedom away and you're then into a sort of situation that everybody finds themselves in during this global pandemic, for me personally, it went against my very nature. And as a result of that, I didn't have those things that were there for me before. And so things started to manifest themselves for me again around not wanting to go out, not wanting to be around people, becoming paranoid about every cough and splutter. And I will know that for people listening to this, that in itself may be ordinary, may be an exact response to the pandemic, specifically around that. But for me, and for a lot of other people that have got history around this, that will become a trigger. And when we're talking about triggers in mental health, we talk about something that might make you feel a certain way. And for me, the pandemic was an absolute catalyst for me to become in my own head. And off of the back of that, behaviors that were uncomfortable for me, checking, making sure that I wasn't unwell and all sorts of stuff, which then prompted me to go and get help. And I'm telling you what, it was absolutely amazing.
Okay.
My therapy was awesome. And I love that. I've got a big fat grin on my face because my therapist was just amazing. And it was the first therapist, that they gave me. And he was just awesome, absolutely awesome. And what was quite fascinating is, as a mental health educator, as a psycho-educator, I was fully aware of the majority of the models that he used in his therapy. I was fully aware of the context behind them. And so he used to say things like, I'm not teaching you psychics, am I? Or have you heard about this model? And I'm like, yeah, no, I know it, but do it anyway. Just because I talk and know about this stuff doesn't mean that, I don't need to go through the process myself. So we went through the whole process, and I was a textbook case. I went from being in real difficulty to coming out and smiling and going, do you know what? I'm really gutted that this is finished, actually, because I've really enjoyed this time. And I've really enjoyed going through the process and becoming well again and putting into place these things that have really helped me. But it was doing the work.
Yeah.
It was doing the work.
It's incredible. I love listening to your sort of your positive perspective of it, which is fantastic. And that's what we want people to understand is, people put sort of the dark shield over or the shroud over it. And we don't want to talk about therapy. We don't want to talk about having to go and use some of these models because it's almost like that feeling of I'm failing if I need to go to that. But it's so important, isn't it? Sort of, and you're right. I train and talk about CBT and DLT and everybody else and every other T that's out there. And it's, it really is an important one to say, I'm not an expert. I'm a human being first. And sometimes having somebody on the other side sitting there talking to us and helping us is what we need too, isn't it? So I'm fascinated by your journey there, and again, just thank you for sharing that, because it's such a wonderful thing to hear. Sort of reality check of how was things at home, because obviously you have children and your husband and that environment. So during that time when you're feeling those higher levels of anxiety, how were things for you?
You know what? I think the thing about kind of mental health and mental ill health specifically, should I say, is that, and also if you've had it for so long, which I have, you learn very easily what you can cope with and what you can't cope with. And those external pointers, if you like, might manifest themselves as being a little bit more sad, or it might be that you're a little bit more irritated. But I am so blessed to have the most amazing family. I have two beautiful children and a supportive hot husband, as I call him, who's listening. Yeah, well, and I love my life. I love my family. My mum lives next door as well, Matt. And it's funny, my mum's a mental health social worker, right? So most people feel as if I'm very blessed, and I am. She lives next door and we're very close. So I had everything I needed at home. I have all of the support that I needed at home, and my home is a happy and positive place. But even externally, when your home is happy and supportive, sometimes what's going on in your head isn't. And that's why I think sometimes people can equate what your home life is like versus what's going on in someone's head. Does that make sense? It's like, well, they've got everything they need, or they've got everything they want. And, their life is fantastic. What have they got to feel sad about or anxious about, or, all of these things, when actually what we have to realize is that whatever's going on externally to somebody in someone's life doesn't necessarily make any difference to what's going on internally.
No.
Doesn't necessarily,
Yeah.
So really super supportive family, and I'm very open, as you could probably imagine. In our house, we talk a lot about emotions and feelings and treatment. And my children know that I had therapy every Monday.
Okay.
And my husband did, and we talk about it very openly, because for them to be able to take it seriously and to also understand how accessible that is, I have to lead by example. And so those conversations around mental health in our family are rife. I'm very, very, very open.
Do you, this is a question because I got children, and I start talking about mental health with my teenager. It's like, oh, stop talking about this. I'm right. Are they receptive to the conversation?
Yes, and the reason they're receptive is because they're quite young. Okay. So I have an 11 and a 13-year-old.
Okay.
So they're quite young, but they're also really positive about it, and they're very empowered by the conversations we have. So my son, for example, made me very proud the other day. He is on a group chat, and one of his friends had written that something's a psycho or something like that. So my boy literally went on the internet, screenshotted what the definition of psychopath was, put it into the chat and said, look guys, I just don't think we should be using words like that. And he said, Mum, that's right, isn't it? And I was just so proud of him. I was like, God. And he did that of his own, volition. It wasn't driven by me. And when he hears words that make him feel uncomfortable, like crazy or mad, or, not all the time, but he'll kind of go, I don't really. So yeah, I feel really.
That's amazing.
I know, right? He's so cool. So yeah, he's a cool kid. My daughter, she's just as good.
Excellent. Oh, I love that. I think that's so fascinating, the way that they sort of they interpret the information, but they also call it out when they're not happy with it. And I think that's such an important and valuable trait that we can engage with our young people to do, isn't it? If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. And if it's a word, you know, and it depends context is always going to be critical in all of the
Yeah,
conversations, but that's brilliant. And you just remind me of the graffiti wall exercise that we talk about in mental health.
I know, yes.
I love that exercise. And for anybody that's listening and
Yeah.
doesn't know what it is, sign up to a mental health first aid training course with Danielle or myself or anybody, you know. But the graffiti exercise is just incredible, isn't it? When you start to realize and visualize the difference between the good stuff, the acceptable words, and it's hard. That's hard.
Yes.
With the bad stuff, the unacceptable, which is the easiest ones that we go to, right?
Yeah.
Naming people, shaming people, and labeling people with uneducated perspective, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's funny because we talked the other day. My children are into Disney still, which is lovely. We all love a Disney film. But recently, they've started to put up on the front of the beginning of the film that they take into consideration and understand that when these films were made, society was not quite as progressive as it is now. So they take note of the way in which some of those stories are told. And I thought that was amazing because I don't know about you, but I often use the example of Belle in Beauty and the Beast when her father Gaston, sorry if there's any spoilers if you've not seen Beauty and the Beast, when her dad is taken and detained under the Mental Health Act, what we would classify that as being now. People might know that as being sectioned or detained, but and it's really scary if you watch that. The way in which it's kind of shown is really dark and really intense, and it's not empowering, it's frightening. And our children are watching that, and their first kind of experience of mental ill health or mental illness in a film, in a TV show, in a film, is one of fear and one of difficulty and one of darkness and one of using mental health and weaponizing mental ill health, where he gets put in the back of this truck or this carriage, in a straitjacket, Matt. So this is so I stop and we have these chats and I say, what do you think that looks like? Because when you're growing up, if I wasn't doing that work with my own children, what would their thoughts and processes be around when somebody is labeled as being mad or crazy? What does that look like? And actually, that's what we're feeding our children inadvertently. And I'm not, I think there is a lot to be said for watching these things and having conversations around them. But we've got to kind of do those little bits of work just every time we see them, just like, chipping away to allow it to be more accessible, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I didn't realize that Disney had done that. So kudos and credit to them for calling that out, and obviously, recognizing some of those sort of those undertones that were slightly different. They've changed the distortion of the view of the world. And I think back to when I was younger, and I'm much older than you, of course, Danielle. But when we were back in the day, and the reality of mental health was totally different to where we are now. Mental illness was all about the straitjackets and people being locked away in asylums and the darkness of it. And every movie that you saw that you thought was about mental health, One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest and Psycho, although Psycho wasn't really in that perspective, but people thought it was all about this is a crazy, madman who's going around killing people in showers and stuff. And it was so distorted, wasn't it? It was so distorted.
But we're still in that, I don't know about you, but even in my training now, when we're talking about accessing support and going down the mental health route, when people go to doctors or GPs and they're talking about things that are affecting their mental health, and then somebody says, maybe we should put you to refer you to the mental health team, and people are fearful. They say, no, I don't want to, it's fine, I'll sort something out, I don't want to go down that route. Because they're petrified of something that's been built up in their mind or their imagination by the things that are being subconsciously fed to us in our everyday lives. So although I don't want to change those programs, Beauty and the Beast is a classic, keep it as it is, but still
shine a light on it, put a bit of sun on it rather than the moon and dark.
Well, exactly, make it all pretty and somebody holding his hand rather than putting him in a straitjacket. But it's about challenging those things, because unless we start to have those conversations, nothing's going to change in my mind.
No, and at the age of our children, it's an age where we should be educating them more around these subjects, definitely. And you're obviously doing an amazing job with your children, so well done. Keep up that amazing work with them, that they're calling things out. But that's the challenge society, though, isn't it? It comes back to that point that you said very much at the beginning around first aid for parents. It doesn't exist, but I always think about when we were antenatal class for our babies, and all we were really taught was how to you know, change the nappy. Well, that's what I remember, changing nappies, which was pretty horrendous. And you know, a few of those sort of softer, more cuddly things around it. We never got taught about when they're older, they might struggle with their mental health, and
Yeah.
how to help them to transition through those journeys. And actually, the biggest changes of our life tend to happen when we're children, right? So from one point to the next, growing up, learning, education, we're influenced by systems. We change at 15, 16 years old. We have to go to college and then learn to, you know, and all the other associated challenges and that's why my daughter struggled at that point. You know, it was all those changes that were going on around, and she wasn't prepared for them, and neither were we, because we'd never had an education on how to prepare ourselves for it, and she definitely never had an education that helped her. So yeah, it's fascinating, honestly. Wow, there we go. So we've got a few more minutes left, and I am so engaged in this conversation. I love it. I think you're just an amazing person, Danielle. So please don't ever change that. So where should we go? Just a few more minutes. Plans. What do you want to do? What's your ambition?
You know what? I think if I'm 100% honest, in terms of what it is I want to do around the work that I currently do, is around educating every lay person. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be within a workplace. It doesn't necessarily have to be within a corporate organization, from well-being at work. You know, we do that. But my passion is for empowering communities to be able to help from the community perspective. And for example, you know, people, and I don't know about what your Facebook group is like where you live, but in our Facebook group here, we have an awful lot of people reaching out for mental health support because they don't know where to go. And then you get this information that is often wrong, or often biased, or often negative because of their own lived experience. And it all goes back to this place where these people are desperate, and but they don't know what the processes look like, right? So I would love to be able to empower communities, or help empower communities to be able to understand the process around accessing support for our mental health, and understanding that there is a lot that we can do on the front line. There is a lot that we can do on the ground. We can empower, we can encourage, we can do all of those E's on our final
don't tell them what it is.
Yeah, exactly, our final E. But you know, do you know what I mean? We can do all of those things. We can make sure that we can empower individuals to make a difference, and that's where my passion lies. So more people, more education, more courses, more training, more conversations, right?
Yeah, you know, and that's what this is for as well. You know, it's another element of those conversations. So it's us having the ability to sort of share some of these thoughts, share these stories. And I'm sure for people that are listening, if you're interested in any of those conversations, if you want to know more about training or just getting out there and being more part of the community, then, you know, we're both here, and, you know, very accessible, of course. Danielle, I'm sure you'll be more than happy if anybody wants to reach out and contact you about anything you're doing, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we are quite active on all social media. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So yeah, drop us a line, see what we can do. Let's have a conversation.
Oh, lovely. Well, that's all great. So I'll drop your contact details as well into the post for this, but as I always do, just the last few thoughts from you. Any words of wisdom, any snippets of life that you want to share, any sort of mottos or anything you want to share, just the final thoughts from you, Danielle.
Well, okay, so I'm going to get a tattoo. I know this is a bit weird, but it's a bit random. I'm getting a tattoo that says it is what it is.
Oh, I've heard that many times. Okay.
Yeah, I know, right? But what do we actually think around that? It is what it is. And some people say to me, Danielle, when you say that, it sounds a bit frivolous. And I say, I appreciate that. That's your opinion. But let's think about it. Sometimes things happen in our lives which we would do anything to change, but we can't. And we need to understand that sometimes it is what it is. What can we do around that? What can we do to make ourselves feel better? What can we do to change what we can? And if we can really hone in on that one sentence and that one, it's a really empowering statement. It doesn't have to be frivolous. It's empowering, right? It is what it is. So there you go. And I'll send you a photo of my tattoo once I get it done. So it's out there now. I've said I'm going to get it, so I'm going to get it.
I love it. I'll tell you what, it is what it is. But I was a bit disappointed because I was hoping you were going to I'm going to get the MH2 logo as a tattoo. I thought that was where we were going.
Oh, sorry.
My days, we're going to get the first ever. Anyway, go and get the is what it is for now. That'll do for now. That'll do for now. No, I love that. And I think you're so right. I think, as I always sort of say to people, we can't change what's happened in the past. We can learn to understand it, and we can try to understand it and use it as an experience and as an education. It is life's a journey of education, right? Moments of clarity, or, maybe we get challenged sometimes too. But it is what it is. It's really interesting. I remember I smiled when you said it, because it reminds me of a boss of mine I used to have, and she used to say it all the time. So when things were going wrong, you'd be like, well, it is what it is, right? And it's
Can't escape it.
Great perspective. So if she's listening to this, she'll know exactly who she is. I'm not going to don't want to name drop too many people. Listen, Danielle, it's been amazing. I really have enjoyed listening to you talking about your journey, your story. Thank you so much for sharing what you've shared as well.
Thank you.
For anybody that is listening, if there is anything that worried you in there, or you want to know more, or you'd like to reach out and have a conversation, Danielle is more than welcome to receive your conversations or your comments, queries, questions. Similarly, if you want to reach out to me, feel free. If you want to be on the podcast, let me know, because I love humans who want to talk about their journeys, because it's just amazing to listen to. But if you are struggling, there are organizations out there today that are there to support you. You're not on your own. Please know you're not on your own. If you're listening to this and you're feeling worried or concerned about things in your life, please know there are places that you can reach out to safely to talk to. Samaritans exist today exactly for that purpose. 116-123. You can text to shout 85258, or there are many other organizations. But just remember, you are not alone. Please know that. We all do actually genuinely care about you too. So we're done, Danielle. It's the end. Thank you so much for your time. I love talking to you. So it's been fantastic, and I will catch up with you soon.
Thank you.